Hey, everybody. Mark and I have over 20 years of experience as therapists and as addicts in long-term successful recovery. We know better than anyone what works and what doesn't to break out of porn and sex addiction, heal betrayal trauma, and reclaim your relationship.
And we've poured all of our personal and professional recovery and healing experience into a first-of-its-kind program for addicts, spouses, and couples. We call it Dare to Connect.
At least 4 times every week, we engage with you in real time, in the trenches, giving you the knowledge and the tools to take back your life and relationship.
Whatever else you've done on your journey for healing and recovery, you've never done anything like this.
Mark and I, we've made all the mistakes, so you don't have to. Don't reinvent the wheel.
We all know tomorrow never comes. Look, don't wait one more day to change. Claim your free 2-week trial today at daretoconnectnow.com.
Hey, everybody. I'm Steve Moore.
And I'm Mark Castleman.
We know the pain and heartbreak of porn and sex addiction.
And we know the triumph of breaking completely free.
Every day, we help our clients find hope and healing.
Join us in the fight to take back your life, your marriage, and be stronger than ever.
This is the PBSE Squared podcast.
Hey, everybody. Mark and Steve on the PBSE podcast. This is episode 167. It's got a little bit different title. Probably might have thrown some of you for a little bit of a loop, which is good, I think. The Fallacy of Fairness. Why I cannot stand up for myself with my partner. Interesting. So let us tell you where this came from. We had a question submitted to us, and the person that submitted it gave a very, very lengthy autobiography telling us about the entire situation. But as we read through it, we came down to the conclusion that we've seen so many times is this fallacy of fairness. But in essence, what this person, what they described was this: they have a spouse, a partner who he has been active in acting out with pornography and online relationships and all sorts of things for it's a couple decades now.
Yeah.
And he won't get into recovery. He won't really take it serious. He has recently admitted that he thinks maybe he has a pornography or sexual addiction, but he just never does the work or gets himself into any sort of program. And so this is, as you might imagine, been very wearing on her over these, several decades of their marriage. And she's raised a number of kids. And she said she basically just focused on her kids. And he was going to go do what he was going to go do. That's how my wife survived. During all the dark days of my addiction. We had 6 children, and she just said, I got 6 kids to raise. I can't deal with his crap. So she just kind of left me to my stuff. And so that happened. And so what happened with her, she also, I love her self-analysis or her authenticity in what she sent us. She said, I realized that I did withhold from him because of my own trauma and what I was going through with him being absent in our family. I withheld emotional closeness. I withheld some affection. She seemed to say that the sexual relationship kind of continued during that whole time, but she did say I was a little bit, offish and separated from him to survive. She's right. That does happen. And so she felt guilty about that. And then lo and behold, somewhere along the way, she got into a vulnerable situation. And she described the scenario where she ended up having a one-time event where she went outside the relationship and had sex. And it was, quite frankly, what she described, I was pretty angry as I read it, because the person who got her into that situation should have been arrested, quite frankly, in my opinion.
Yeah.
But he blackmailed her and said if she ever revealed it, he'd tell everyone. And it was a really messy situation. So now she has, all of her struggles along the way. And then this one event, and now she feels, as a spouse of an addict, she doesn't feel like she has the right today to speak her truth, set boundaries, stand up for herself. She feels like she's on unequal ground morally with him, because she messed up, and she went outside the marriage and had sex that one time, plus being emotionally distant from him and so forth to survive. So she doesn't feel like she can set boundaries today. She doesn't feel like she can speak her truth or stand her ground, or she feels like she probably needs to move on from this relationship, but she doesn't feel she has any standing to do so.
Oh gosh, that's such a hard situation, and we're really grateful that this spouse did elect to write in, because this is something that comes up often in the therapy office. When we start to talk about the dynamics of communicating and addressing concerns or issues in a relationship, it's not uncommon for this to happen for a variety of reasons. And there are a lot of things that are in play when it comes to what gets involved, or I guess what disrupts the dynamic of being authentic or transparent with a spouse about concerns. But one of those issues that does come up is this thinking error that's oftentimes referred to as what's called the fallacy of fairness. This month on Dare to Connect, we are covering it. We have a monthly topic there, and this month is ironically thinking errors. And so we've been talking about a variety of different thinking errors. In fact, today we broke down from I was on a trip with my wife last week, and this week we're breaking down in real time some thinking errors that came into play in a situation that she and I found ourselves in, and how that was disruptive for us, but how we're successfully navigating that. And today we talked about the addict side of that, meaning mine. And Wednesday we'll be kind of going through my wife's side of that and processing through things. And anyway, if you have not taken the opportunity yet to give Dare to Connect a try, please do come and join us. Find out what the buzz is about. We continue to grow by leaps and bounds there. We have 3 sessions a week for addict spouses and couples, 2 12-step based support sessions for addicts and partners on the weekend. Dare to Connect is a place where you can tag team with your recovery every 48 to 72 hours at the most, with good resources, good people, 2 therapists in long-term recovery themselves, as well as an ever-growing community of people who have been where you're at. So we hope that you'll come join us and take a look at that at daretoconnectnow.com. We do have a free 2-week trial where you can check that out with no obligation. We'd love to have you join us. But as we talk about thinking errors like the fallacy of fairness, this is one that is based in, there are probably a lot of origins for the thinking error fallacy of fairness and where it comes from. Where I tend to see, and Mark, I've talked about this, where we tend to see this pop up a lot of the time is from highly, I guess you could say, moralized communities, right? Sometimes religious communities, where there's kind of a very moralistic approach to life and how it should work. Now, as with all thinking errors, right, there are elements of that are very true, very valid, and very, I would argue, good. Right? It's not that having a moralistic point of view or a moral value set when it comes to intimacy or connection is a bad thing. But where the fallacy of fairness goes wrong is that even though it can pop up in a lot of ways, what we're seeing here is kind of one of the more common ones, where essentially my thinking is as follows: in order for me to have an opinion or a reality, right, that I'm going to share with another person, I have to have some sort of moral high ground in order for that position to be valid.
Yes.
Right. So my own authenticity, my own experience, I'm only able to speak to that or vocalize what I need. My voice, in other words, the strength of my voice is dictated by where I stand on in terms of moral high ground with the other person that I'm discussing those things with. Right. And so I have a stronger voice if I'm the one, quote unquote, in the right. Right. Yeah. And I'm kind of the one who holds all the cards. But if I'm not, and if my side of the street, or if my yard isn't cleaner than yours, then that diminishes my voice and my ability to speak or have validity in my position.
Yeah. I don't get a place at the table.
Yes.
Right. And as I look back on my life experience, and I know, Steve, you too, with, and your clients, we come out of a number of cultures where this was taught to us. This was taught in the family cultures we often come from, right? I'm the parent, you're the child. Shut up, and I'm the one that gets to be heard because you're just a kid, right?
I have my life experience or my wisdom or my standing trumps yours, and so your position doesn't have any standing.
Yeah, you don't get a voice,
Yes.
right? I experienced that in school, right? Teacher versus student, same thing. You don't get a voice, right? You shut up and sit at your desk. I experienced it in my religious culture, right? If you're not, living all of these specific commandments or, being righteous or doing all these things, guess what? You don't get to express. You don't get to have a voice or the same standing as these other, good people over here do. So I experienced this inequality, this fallacy of fairness for a lot of my life. And now throw on top of all that, that I'm now an addict, engaging in all these shameful, perverted, loser behaviors. And now I truly have no voice because I don't get to say one word until I've overcome all that and I've raised myself up to this superior moral place where all you people are at. Then I get to speak. Then I get to have rights. So I suffered from that horribly for a long time.
Yeah. And it does come, like you said, Mark, it does come from a lot of different places. And it should be noted that to some degree, right, ranking and standing in position, because this is another source of where this oftentimes come from, in less intimate relationships, a hierarchy-based structure is not only what a relationship is based on, sometimes out of necessity.
Sure.
It is how an organization may function, right? If I'm the owner of a company and I have, employees, even though I may value their opinion, right, at the end of the day, we are not equals, right? At the end of the day, I am still the boss. They are still the subordinates. I pay them. They don't pay me. And the safety and security of the business is at the end of the day my responsibility, right? And so there is kind of I guess you could say, a power differential there.
There is. I mean, you would hope that boss would give his people a voice.
Correct. Exactly.
A place at a table.
Yes.
Right. I mean, obviously, in a school situation, you can't have students mouthing off, uncontrollably the whole time. Right. So you're right. There are practicalities to it. I think, but too often what happens is those practicalities and, the sound principles of such a thing gets out of control when people kind of use it as a power play.
Correct. Yeah.
Yeah.
And oftentimes ego gets involved, right? And pride and all sorts of different things. And so, so oftentimes those relationships, there is to a degree, I guess you could say, a diminished collaborative nature to those relationships, because that's how a non-intimate, non-egalitarian relationship is designed, right? When the rubber meets the road, there are, somebody has to be in charge, and there is one position that does kind of where the buck stops, and
Yep.
However, when we are talking about intimate relationships, right, as a relationship moves along the spectrum from the non-intimate to the more intimate, particularly in a marriage, although this is applicable to other just close relationships or friendships as well, but in a marriage, when we're talking about the highest degree of intimacy that we're trying to reach, that pinnacle of intimacy, among what else that represents, is also a relationship in which the relationship should also be the pinnacle of egalitarianism, meaning that those two people, right, have equal seats at the table. I don't have to flash my credentials, quote unquote, emotional or otherwise, in order to have an equal voice for with my partner, right? Regardless of the mistakes in other words, even though I may have made mistakes, even though my thinking may be flawed in some ways, even though my humanity is on display at times, those factors do not diminish my position within the relationship and the validity of my perspective and my own authenticity. Because in order for an intimate relationship to function, intimacy by its very nature denotes a what we would call a bounty mentality, right? Non-egalitarian, non-intimate relationships operate off of, among other things, a scarcity-based mentality. There's only so much perspective to go around. There's only so many positions that can be taken, right? At the end of the day, somebody has to just make a call, and then the other people have to fall in line. When you're talking about an intimate relationship, a relationship where everybody has an equal seat at the table, even though one person may carry a background where, for example, with this partner, even though she may have a background of having made a very significant, and it is significant, right, a very significant mistake in the relationship, the fact that she has been human or made a mistake in a relationship does not diminish or invalidate her needs, her wants, hopes, dreams, vision for the relationship, and who she is, what she is about, and where she is trying to go. Right? We both have an equal seat at the table, because one of the ways in which I see the fallacy of fairness get in the way is that there's, and this is a good way. This is kind of a good litmus test for those of you who are listening. If this is in play for you, do either one of you find yourselves keeping, quote, score with your partner? Right? Scorekeeping is always a hallmark of this fallacy of fairness, right? Who's been better or worse this week in the relationship, right? Who's been more kind or less kind? Who's had this or that, or whatever the case is, and then we're making decisions from that place. When in reality, in intimate relationships where connection is real and it's authentic and it's genuine, we are all actively collaborating for the greater good, and we are all working towards a common set of goals. And even though we may disagree and we may not see eye to eye, or we may see things again very differently, the fact that I have not been perfect in X, Y, or Z area does not invalidate my ability to speak about the necessity for change or for needs in that area.
Well, and I'll tell you a place where this comes up, Steve, and we both see this a lot. One of the things that happens in recovery is for example, a guy who's been suffering from addiction. He gets into recovery, he starts figuring out things about himself for the very first time in his life, usually, and he starts to become more healthy, more stable, starts to communicate a little bit better. He starts to get a handle on his emotions. And what often will happen is his partner will, quote, lag behind. Right? He's making all these improvements, and his he or she, his partner, is not keeping up. A lot of times they're looking at their addict partner going, okay, wow, I can see some changes in him, but are they real? Are they going to last? Is this just gaslighting me like it has in the past? Can I dare to believe that this is a different person now? It takes time to come around to that. And sometimes, the non-addict spouse just doesn't know what to do. They don't dare, to believe that this is real. So they'll kind of lag behind. And what I'll tell my addicts in recovery, like I know you do, will say, you know what? This partner of yours, how many years or decades have they put up with you and been patient and shown you grace and hung in there? Now you get to fill that role. Now it's not equal in a little bit different direction. And can you be patient and kind and have grace as your partner, quote, catches up, and you prove that this is going to last, and that they can dare to be vulnerable and put themselves out there, and do they start to feel a little bit of safety, and they'll come along. Can you hang in while that happens?
Yeah.
That's not an equal relationship right there. But as a guy in recovery, I can go, you know what? It doesn't need to be equal. I'm a little bit stronger in these three areas right now. So you know what? I'll carry that load. Right? Here comes the collaboration that you talk about.
Yeah. Now, it doesn't mean that boundaries don't have an effect here, because it's important to bring this up, right? Oftentimes when we have these discussions with clients, this is the first thing that will come up. Oh, so because of this whole fairness deal, Steve, so even though he's hurt me 16 ways to Sunday, I should just treat him like an equal and not pretend that, that hasn't been. Absolutely not.
That's right? The first thing that comes up every time.
It is.
I know.
Right. If, for example, your addict partner has a history of lying or being deceptive or minimizing, boundaries should dictate a certain level of skepticism there. But skepticism does not denote not hearing another person out. See, and that's the key. that's where oftentimes I think couples go awry is, well, he's been deceptive or inauthentic in this area before, so I shouldn't hear him out now. Or vice versa, right?
Yeah.
This is just her trauma talking, right? Her trauma always comes out when this topic comes up, X, Y, or Z topic comes up, and I just turn myself off. It's Charlie Brown's mom. I just shut it down because, this is just her being trauma her, right?
Yeah.
And both of those positions are equally invalidating, because a person may struggle in an area or has historically struggled in an area or with a concept or in an issue before. Unless we continue to pursue that authentic, intimate space where everyone has an equal seat at the table, we will continue to perpetuate the inequality in a relationship that holds connection back, and that prevents change.
Yes.
In other words, if I'm viewing my partner through a lens of, well, they've always done it this way, and so their opinion matters less because of it, then how can that person ever grow? How can you grow with them? How can the relationship change or evolve? If we've already decided that the other person doesn't have as much of a seat at the table here because of X, Y, or Z from the past, how can we ever change? Now again, do boundaries say that maybe I should be looking through that through a lens of skepticism? Sure. Does that maybe mean that I need to have more evidence from them to be able to buy into what they're saying? Absolutely. It can mean a lot of different things, but in other words, hearing another person out and giving them a seat at the table doesn't mean co-signing on their bullshit, right?
Yeah.
Is really what we're talking about.
Doesn't mean agreeing.
Correct.
I mean, I'll give you a classic situation that happened some time back with a client, with a couple. They had very different ideas about what was considered to be loyal and faithful and committed to each other. He, for example, believed that there should be the ability to have an open marriage. If they want to go outside the marriage for sex, that should be perfectly acceptable as long as we're dedicated to each other. This was his opinion. She did not feel that way at all. And when they first started working with me, they were very shut down because of that difference. And there was this big, huge gap. They didn't talk about it. There was just fuming and ships that passed in the night. They were kind of living as married singles. And we started to open up the dialogue where each person had an equal seat at the table to express where they were coming from. Not rightness or wrongness. Please, anybody listening, I am not saying that this guy was right. I couldn't disagree with him more as a therapist. But I taught them about this, be careful of the fallacy of fairness. Can you each invite one another to come to the table and speak your truth and be authentic and vulnerable and open? And they finally did. Now, here's the thing. They finally came to the collaborative conclusion that they could not work together. The relationship for those two wouldn't work because she fully understood where he was coming from and he understood where she was coming from because we had open dialogue for an extended period. And they finally looked at each other and said, we're way too far apart on this. But I hear you now and you hear me and we know where we're coming from. And now we get to decide whether we're going to choose each other or not. And they decided not to choose each other.
Yeah, no, I love that. I love that. Right. And that probably is one of the most important elements of this, is that the fallacy of fairness will always, among whatever else it does, it will always inhibit growth in a relationship. Right. Because again, if a relationship is to survive, it's important that we be moving towards a place of getting to a place of being on equal footing in all areas. And if issues arise or come up with that, like in your situation, better to know now. Right. Let's figure those out now.
Yeah. And
let's address them as they come up.
And she put very tight boundaries on him. And she was very clear about what the outcomes and consequences would be if he refused to adhere to those boundaries and the needs that she clearly expressed that were critical for her to continue in a relationship. So please, everyone hearing us, this is not a boundaries discussion. No. This is a discussion about equal voices at the table.
Yes. And so, guys, there's so much more we could say about this. Again, we'd love to. Right now is All Things Thinking airs on Dare to Connect. We hope that you'll come join us. Check us out at daretoconnectnow.com. We'd love to have you come over and give our program a free trial. We always appreciate addressing things in short, brief fashion on these short podcasts. If you do have something that you would like to submit to us, we are always open to receiving those at pbsepodcast.com. There's a contact form you can submit those at. We always love hearing from you, whether it's questions you'd like answered or feedback about the show. It's always gratifying to hear from all of you. We are grateful that you're here and appreciate your patronage and finding a little bit of recovery to hopefully start your day, your week off in the right way. Again, we hope that you'll give us a shot. Come check us out at Dare to Connect. We'd love to have you there. But other than that, we'll hope to hear from you in the future. We're grateful for you being here, and I suppose we'll catch you next week.
Yeah, I guess we were going to give them a quick assignment.
Oh shit!
We forgot all about that.
Stop! Everyone, stop! We're not done. We lied.
Yeah.
We lied.
So here's your assignment. If you find yourself in a close, intimate relationship, whatever that is, where you're waiting for this magical equalization, or to be on the same moral ground, or the same, the same principles, or the same thinking level, and you're not allowing an open voice for both of you in that relationship because you're waiting for that equalization, you're in the fallacy of fairness, then do what you need to do to be able to sit at the table, the dialogue table together, and start to allow each other the room to voice where you're coming from. Open up the dialogue, regardless of where the fairness happens to be, or the moral ground, or any of the rest of it. Now, make sure it's safe. Right? If it isn't safe to come together physically, then maybe you'll need to do this, through writing, through email, or through a letter. Right? Whatever way you can open up the dialogue to, as we've said, give that equal place at the table, regardless of the other things that are going on. Open that dialogue up and start the exchange. That's our invitation to each of you.
Love it. Awesome, guys. Okay, well, now we're going to wrap up for real.
Now we are, for sure.
Have a great week, everybody. We'll catch you next time.
All right, we'll see you.
Everything expressed on the PBSE podcast are the opinions of the hosts and the participants, and is for informational and educational purposes only. This podcast should not be considered mental health therapy or as a substitute thereof. It is strongly recommended that you seek out the clinical guidance of an individual qualified mental health professional. If you're experiencing thoughts of suicide, self-harm, or a desire to harm others, please dial 911 or go to your nearest emergency room.